Ja, hallå och välkomna ska ni vara till uppmarknadsuppdatering nummer 2, ett specialavsnitt med Alpgott. Jag heter Johan Lundstedt och idag är det den 1 februari och jag har med mig Jonas och Olavi. Välkommen!
Tackar.
Väldigt trevligt. Du är tillbaka för andra gången den här veckan. Vi ska titta på lite bolagsrapporter. Det har ju hunnit hända en hel del. Och även en liten kort resumé av allt som har hänt. Men också, vi har en internationell gäst idag. We are very happy to say welcome to Charlie Thomas from Edentree. Welcome.
Thank you.
We are going to hear everything about your fund, Edentree Green Future Fund.
Indeed.
Yeah, but first of all, we are going to listen to Jonas. Varsågod.
Tackar. Och det blir en kort agenda här. Jag tänkte ta en liten resumé där på vad vi har gjort i Alpgott Equities-fonden. Och under januari så har vi då sålt ett antal bolag. Vi har sålt Tesla, Sandvik och Axelis. Och sen har vi ökat lite grann i Mercado Libre, som ju har en enorm kunddatabas framförallt i Sydamerika. Det tycker vi är väldigt spännande. Vi har 55 stycken olika innehav i fonden och fonden stärktes med 3,4% i januari medan index var upp 2,3%. Och starkast gick techbolag som Nvidia, ASML, AMD, men även Cencora och Meta, Novo Nordisk och Eli Lilly. Och alla de här var upp mer än 10%. Sen hade vi några ankare också. Soitec, VNV, Intervac, On, Infineon och Caliditas. De var ner med 10%. Inte något bolag specifikt som så. Under månaden så kom vårt läkemedelsinnehav Camurus, som är mest känt för sitt opioidberoende läkemedel Buvidal, med en ny emission, besked om det, och de tog in 1 miljard lite drygt till en rabatt på 7%. Och aktien föll betydligt mer än 7% på det här beskedet, vilket vi tycker är lite märkligt eftersom man nu får bättre möjligheter att utveckla den amerikanska marknaden där opioidberoende är som störst i världen. Så vi tycker det var en offensiv emission och stödjer helt klart bolaget och dess strävan att fortsätta utveckla det här läkemedlet, men även ett par andra som ligger i ganska sen fas utveckling. Så att fortsatt spännande, men aktien hade gått väldigt hårt, väldigt starkt intill det här beskedet, så att det var en bra satt emission på så vis. Men vi behåller aktien och gillar caset då. Vi hade också rapport från Taiwan Semiconductor som levererar ett riktigt bra resultat för fjärde kvartalet, och 2023 var ju egentligen ett litet mellanår då, eftersom efterfrågan inom då smartphones och datorer var lite lägre, och det har ju med pandemin och allt det här och eftersläpningar av det att göra. Däremot allting inom AI, de här smarta chippen, det växer så det knakar, och det är ju Nvidia framförallt då som har tagit kapacitet från Apple som har ett annat datachip i sina nya telefoner då. Så den utvecklingen var väldigt, väldigt starkt, och vinsten har ökat nu sekventiellt. Och det är också positivt, det visar att botten är satt då i Taiwan Semiconductors. Och nu har man ett antal fabriker som står på kö, bland annat i Japan kommer man inviga en fabrik här den 24 februari, och i Tyskland under Q4 i år, och sen en nästa år i USA i Arizona. Så vi var väldigt nöjda med rapporten och gillar det här med att de guidar för en försäljningstillväxt strax över 20% det här året, vilket var snäppet högre än vad analytikerna trodde. Sen hade vi Investor. Det är inte några estimat på ett sådant bolag direkt, utan man får titta lite grann på totalavkastningen under kvartalet, och de var faktiskt lägre. De var 12% mot börsen som steg 14%. Och det får man ju säga då, ja, då var den inte helt godkänd, men det fanns positiva tecken där och Mölnlycke utvecklas bra. Och så överraskar man också med en högre utdelning än väntat, så att det tyckte vi det gav en tumme upp där. Sen hade vi IT-bolaget ServiceNow. Oerhört intressant bolag som verkligen har omfamnat AI i sina processer och i sina produkter. Det är ett modulbaserat IT-system. Och det här är ett bolag som har 95% av alla eller Fortune 500-bolagen som kunder, och 99% av de här kunderna, de förnyar sina kontrakt med det här bolaget. Det var en riktigt bra rapport, och de guidar också klart högre än marknaden förväntade, och aktien har gått starkt och fortsätter ha goda möjligheter framöver. Sen hade vi ASML då, som avslutade året med ett rekordhögt orderläge då, 9 miljarder, var skyhögt över vad analytikerna trodde och tänkte. Och nu kommer det här vara ett litet mellanår för dem, där man inte ökar försäljningen så mycket, men nästa år så kommer det skjuta fart ordentligt. Och det är ju då efterfrågan just på de här mer smarta chippen som ASML är experter på att tillverka med sin maskin då. Det är ju sen de säljer den här maskinen till Taiwan Semiconductor bland annat då. Så även det är ett väldigt fortsatt intressant innehav för oss då. Sen nu för någon dag sedan här då, så hade vi Microsoft som kom med sin rapport. De slog marknadsförväntningarna, och det var framförallt den här molntjänsterna, Azure, som då inte minst är behjälpt av generativ AI. Och deras Copilot 365, som är Office-paketet med integrerat med avancerad AI, det kommer ju bli ett standardprogram i framtiden. Nu tar man en avgift för företag på $30 per månad per användare. Och där kommer ju som sagt då integreras som en ordinarie avgift vart det lider. Intressant var också då att köpet av Activision, spelbolaget, blev klart, och det har då gett iBox en uppsving, och nu har man 200 miljoner användare. Så att det var lite en kul sidoobservation. Och man noterar också att Office-paketet, de har 380 miljoner kunder, företagskunder bara, och då har vi inte räknat privatpersoner. Så Microsoft fortsätter att mörsa på och har ju en enorm kassa att utvecklas vidare. Sen hade vi chiptillverkaren AMD som ju konkurrerar med Nvidia, och det var lite blandat, men det jag tog fasta på var att deras nya starka chip, som bland annat används i AI-relaterad verksamhet, säljer som smör. Och de har ju en uppdaterad produktportfölj nu som klarar behoven för AI, som behöver mycket kapacitet då, helt enkelt att hantera stora datamängder. Men övriga delar då, spel och PC, föll tillbaka under kvartalet, men det ser ut som om det har bottnat där, och spel, om man tittar på prognoserna, lär bottna i Q2, och inbäddade produkter, de chip som går dit, kommer att bottna nu det här kvartalet. Så sekventiellt så ser AMD väldigt starkt ut här. Alphabet slog också förväntningarna, det är ju Google. Och det som oroade analytikerna lite grann var att man sa att man behövde lägga på lite mer investeringar för att fortsätta utveckla verksamheten. Men det här är ju lite blaha det här, därför de har 108 miljarder i nettokassa, de kan göra precis vad de vill då. Och det är alltså 108 miljarder dollar. Så de bestämmer helt och hållet sin egen agenda. Vi tyckte att det var en stark rapport, och det var en bra guidning också. Sen hade vi Novo Nordisk som ju trots att de tidigare har gjort omvända vinstvarningar och guidat och försökt vara schysst mot marknaden, så lyckades man ändå slå högt ställda förväntningar och också guida högre för 2024 än vad man hade förväntat. En liten orosnotis då, inte någonting som oroar oss men som marknaden blir lite överraskad av att man ska investera 45 miljarder, tidigare sa man 27,5 miljard. Och allt handlar om att bygga mer fabrikskapacitet så att man kan tillverka mer insulin och mer av de här fetmapreparaten, Wegovy med flera då. Och de är ju ganska sturska då, det går bra för dem, så de meddelar ett aktieåterköpsprogram på 20 miljarder och skickade också upp utdelningen lite högre än vad marknaden hade förväntat sig. Så även där får de en tumme upp av oss då. Sen hade vi ett lite tråkigare rapport från Santander. Den såg bra ut när den kom, men resultatet var av sämre kvalitet. Det var återbäringar av skatt på elbilar, ett leasingprogram som gjorde att vinsten såg bättre ut, och utvecklingen i Spanien, USA och Brasilien var faktiskt operationellt sämre än vad marknaden hade väntat sig. Men aktierna har varit stark ändå och fortsätter att trenda på, men vi får fundera lite grann hur vi gör med det innehavet lite längre fram här. Och de två sista som jag kunde nämna då, det är Mastercard som ju levererar fina kvartalssiffror. Men om man tittar lite grann på omsättningen i december så någonting som också kommer spilla in i januari, det är att det har varit väldigt kallt väder, och då handlar man inte lika mycket med kortet där. Men vi räknar med ganska små justeringar av estimaten med anledning av det här resultatet då. Och sen Cencora som tidigare hette Amerisource Bergen. De kom med imponerande starka siffror, och det här har faktiskt med diabetes och fetmaläkemedel att göra, därför de här är ju distributörer. De har finger med i alla delar i sjukvården i USA, har i princip hela sin verksamhet i just USA, och då guidar man upp då därför att just de här diabetes- och fetmabehandlingsprodukterna säljer som smör i USA. Så de guidar upp högre än väntat. Vi var väldigt nöjda med det här, och det är en aktie som har gått väldigt starkt. Så överlag en bra start på rapportsäsongen för Alcott Equities och en bra start på utvecklingen med performance. Och nu ska vi titta på en annan väldigt spännande fond, och det är Edentree Green Future Fund. Charlie Thomas, you're most welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you very much indeed for giving me this opportunity to present. We're actually here in Sweden and the Nordics this week, presenting to clients and prospective clients as well. And thank you for the opportunity to give a short, very rapid introduction to the Edentree Green Future Fund. So if we go on to the so just by way of introduction, if we go on to the next slide. One more, sorry, there we go. Just a very quick introduction in terms of Edentree. Who is Edentree? We are a London-based asset manager. We have been running environmental and sustainable and responsible investment funds now for over 35 years. So we're very unique in the space of being a firm wholly dedicated to sustainable and responsible investment. And I think that makes us very unique. We are managing around about 4.2 billion euros of money for charities, for institutions, for retail clients across the UK and internationally. I think what's unique perhaps about Edentree, just so you have context, we're actually owned by a charity, the Benefact Trust. And that is and so all of our profits go up to the charity and are distributed out to good causes. So it's a very unique business model, a very long-term business model. And in fact, the Benefact Trust is the third largest corporate donator in the UK, to give you some context. So very quickly, that's the background to Edentree. What I'd now do is really go into the product and give you a little bit more about the Green Future Fund and why we believe we're different. Now, I could spend the whole presentation talking about the importance of environmental issues, but I won't. I'll make it very, very clear that I think a lot of the audience here will understand the importance of environmental issues. I think what's really important to understand it from our perspective is the investment opportunity. We are convinced that this will redefine business models, redefine economies, and redefine innovation. And the really critical part to understand from this all is that we believe this is a multi-trillion, multi-decade investment opportunity, which is increasingly global. And in essence, what we are trying to do as a fund is really draw out what we believe are the long-term investment winners in this space. First and foremost, this is an investment proposition. So a little bit about the strategy. Obviously, just to introduce myself, my name is Charlie Thomas. I'm the Chief Investment Officer, as well as the co-manager on this investment strategy. I work alongside Tom Fitzgerald. And in terms of the strategy at a glance, we are currently 2 years in the running at Edentree. I'll touch on that a little bit more. We're currently just gone through $50 million in terms of size. For those who are interested or want to know, we are a SFDR classified Article 9 fund. We are a focused portfolio in the sense of holding between 40 and 60 stocks. We are global, importantly. And what I guess is also important is to recognize that it's not just Tom and myself working in isolation. I'm supported by 15 others who are dedicated to this area of investment. Dedicated in terms of involved in terms of fixed income strategies, in terms of other global strategies, in terms of UK, European, or even green infrastructure. So we have arguably one of the largest investment teams dedicated to this area of investment. So if we can move on to the investment philosophy, which is on the next slide, and I want to just highlight the investment philosophy. Why? Because I think it's very important to understand it in terms of how we invest. Okay? We believe that the market assumes that returns mean revert over time. Okay? Which in our view often leads to some really high quality environmental solution companies trading at material discounts to their intrinsic value. Why? Because the market doesn't recognize a longer term opportunity around the solutions that they provide. Okay? Secondly, we are a long-term strategy. By that I mean we typically have holding periods between 3 and 5 years. In fact, I've got investments in my portfolios which backdate right back to over 20 years in terms of holding. Now, we think that's important because we also recognize that the market doesn't necessarily ascribe value. And we believe this inefficiency in the market can be exploited by ourselves as fund managers. And thirdly, which I think is important, is that a lot of people think about this area of investing as one which is really focused around growth, right? An early stage, okay? That isn't necessarily the case in actual fact. We believe there are a large number of companies and very much our focus of our portfolio is around those companies where we believe that they have an established advantage, but they are profitable today, okay? All in all, we have come up with a concept what we believe best illustrates our portfolio, one which we call green at a reasonable price. So a slight alternative to GARP, okay? Green at a reasonable price. So let's just talk about what that means in terms of context and performance. If we can go on to the next slide, what I really wanted to do here is illustrate. I joined Edentree about 2.5 years ago. We launched the strategy 2 years ago, but actually this is not the first time I've been managing environmental funds. Okay, I was the lead fund manager at Jupiter, the Jupiter Ecology Fund, for nearly 18 years. So I think what we have here is an example of very long-term investment, productive very long-term investment, of focusing in this particular area. And I think that's important because, as we've seen over the last few years, there's been a large increase in the number of funds which are focused in this area. But actually, they're focused in this area without the longevity and understanding of investing in these areas through multiple cycles. I think we're unique insofar that we have a track record which goes right back to 2003. So let's turn a little bit closer now into what we consider to be environmental investing. And what I've set out here is what we call our Green Future Framework. To be clear, this is the world that I live in. This is my universe, okay? What we're looking for is companies which provide the solutions to these global environmental challenges. It could be alternative energy, energy efficiency, recycling, water, the future of mobility, regenerative agriculture. These are the types of themes that we focus in on and the companies that are providing, most importantly, the solutions. Now, to give you some context, this universe today is round about 1,500 companies globally. Now, that in itself is actually quite a sizable universe, but put into the context to see how it's grown. When I started managing these strategies back in 2003, the total universe was around about 250. So you can see the level of growth that we've had over the last 20 years or so. We anticipate it to continue to grow. It's exciting, right? But it's also challenging because we have more companies, more opportunities to really understand and invest in that respect. So this is our focus. Where we differentiate, I think, in some respects intentionally, but also intentionally because of our experience, is that we understand, importantly, how we believe this area looks like. And what I've done here is basically kind of try to split up the life cycle of a company, right, to give you a sense of it. So at the early stages, on the left-hand side, you've got companies which are at research level, early stage. Then we go to pioneering. So this might be venture capital stage or maybe early float stage. Inflecting, so very much going through the accelerating phase of the market, through to sustaining. And sustaining means that they are arguably considered by the market to be slowing in growth, right? And then finally mature, so very low growth types of companies. Now, if this is our universe where we believe the best risk-adjusted returns for investment is primarily not in those pioneering stages, not in those early stage companies, those pre-profit companies. No, actually, as you can see on the right-hand side, our exposure is predominantly focused in on what we believe are much more or maturing or inflecting types of companies. Why? Because we often believe that the market overlooks the long-term opportunity associated with it. That means we're looking at companies which are profitable today entirely across the universe. And I think that makes us a very unique. Now, if we were to turn that to how that looks like in terms of the across those themes, so a complicated graph, apologies, but one we call the bubble chart, which basically reflects our allocations. So the size of those bubbles reflects our exposure, and then we plotted it against the PE, the price earnings ratio, and the capitalization of that sector. And what you can see is that largest exposures we've actually got are trade at or around the traditional indices. And actually that's a feature we hear from clients time and time again, that this idea that you don't have to pay huge premiums to access the green opportunity. You can do so on a more de-risked from a valuation perspective and a diversified perspective as well. And we think that's a very differentiated characteristic that we have with the portfolios. So turning to the types of exposures that you should see with the Green Future Fund, we have found that over many years that we are actually diversified across all our themes. It's not to say that we asset allocate, that's entirely not what we do. We're very much a bottom-up stock picking portfolio, but it gives you a reflection of the types of exposures that we will have. It's not to say that we don't have views. That's very important given our expertise in this area. To give you a live example at the moment, in the alternative energy space, in fact, we have no exposure to any wind turbine companies or manufacturers or solar manufacturers. Now, for a lot of people, that's quite surprising. But actually for us, that's normal because we don't feel there's sufficient intrinsic value in these companies, given the competitive tensions that we see in the marketplace. It's not to say that we don't think there's opportunity and that there's growth, but we prefer to pay the theme around, let's say, alternative energy in a different way, not necessarily through the typical types of companies that you might expect in these portfolios. So it's very important to recognize that through our experience, we do make views and we do take views around certain sectors at certain points because we don't feel they're the right sort of investments for the portfolio. So bringing it to the next slide, and just to try and capture it, I guess, in terms of understanding how the portfolio compares. Now, to be clear, the index that we have, or the benchmark we have, is the MSCI Acqui World. You might argue it's not the best index for our particular area of investment, but I think it's the one that most commonly understood and applied around the world. I think if we were to understand some of the characteristics, particularly on the lower table that you can see, there's some clear aspects which are, again, as I highlighted before, often surprising for people to see, that our price earnings ratio is actually in line with index, despite superior growth and cash flow characteristics. The price to book in line, the dividend yield actually also in line. Now, what I think this highlights is that despite the fact that we are very, very active, as you will see, we are over 99% active against the MSCI World. We are very mindful to maintain a tracking error of around about the 5 to the 6%. We can do this because we understand factor risk. And that's a very important aspect when you have a small universe of companies, is ensuring that you're not over index to the similar types of factor risks. So when we build up our portfolio, we're very mindful to ensure that we have that dispersion in terms of factor, and that helps to ensure that our tracking error, despite being 99.5% active, is actually quite moderate compared with the index, but also very much compared with our peers who would typically have much, much higher tracking errors. So that's very much the fun. I just wanted to really finish off on a couple of slides just to give you a little bit more understanding of the types of companies. Now, actually, I've just used this as an example. This is a company called Clean Harbors. Actually, is now the largest holding in our portfolio of recently, but it's an example of a company that you're going to see time and time again across the portfolio. $9.5 billion market capitalization, mid cap. This company is very unique in that it's the largest provider of hazardous waste disposal for industry in the US. Okay, it has round about 80% market share. Right, so very strong economic moat. Equally, what it does and some of the services that it provides has a unique part of its business which collects engine oil, used engine oil. So when you go to the mom and pop tire places in the US and you have your oil change, what Clean Harbors does is it collects all that oil, recycles it, so refines it, and brings it back to original oil again. In fact, even better quality oil. So it's a really good example of a waste product which they're taking, re-refining and bringing it back to the market. In fact, they re-refine something in the region of about 230 million gallons of oil every year in the US, to give you a sense of the scale of that business. Now, that is a typical type of company that you will see in our portfolio, and often overlooked by the market for its long-term opportunities. And so just touching on to the next slide, just to bring that a little, zoom that out a little bit, and apologies, there's no need to read the descriptions or anything of the company, but I actually wanted to just give you the top 10 and run you through the top 10. Why? Because the way to understand this portfolio is to take, in many respects, take the top 10 and times it by 4 to give you, well, a bit more than 4 to give you 47 stocks. Okay, we do not invest in the household names. Okay, so let me run you through the top 10 just so you get a flavor of the types of companies and where we see the opportunities in this area of investing. Clean Harbors, we've already touched on. Schneider Electric, actually one of our largest holdings in the portfolio, very much focused around energy efficiency and automation within Europe and globally. Stantec, our third largest holding, Canadian environmental consultancy. Brambles, an Australian recycler of pallets. Okay, pallets for shipping. Okay, there are a lot of pallets around the world, I can assure you. Prysmian, a company involved in alternative energy, but actually what it does is it produces the cabling to transport electricity around. So for example, if you take an offshore wind farm, how do we bring that electricity onshore through AC or DC types of technology? MSA, a safety company in the US. ANSYS, a wonderful engineering company, software company, unfortunately not in the portfolio for much longer because it has just been announced that it's going to be acquired. Applied Materials, a semiconductor manufacturing company, but very much focused around those technologies used in solar, wind, and EV. Veolia Environment, a name perhaps you have heard of, French waste company, and Enel, an Italian utility, green utility. Now, the reason I just ran through those top 10 is not to give you stock tips, but really to give you a sense of what those portfolios are, or what our portfolio is, and how we operate differently in that context. And so really just to kind of to summarize on the final slide, I don't really need to talk about the opportunity. I think it's very, very clear. The way to probably the one point to take away, think of it as multi-trillion, multi-decade. Okay, our view is it is a revolution. It's a quiet revolution sometimes, but it is a revolution that's going on behind the scenes, and it's creating the investment opportunity. What we need to do as a team is retain that kind of focus around creating a high conviction, a high quality portfolio, investing in those companies which provide the solution to those environmental challenges in a way which we believe is not only different, but also has been managed for a very long period of time. So it's very well matured in terms of that investment process and the outcomes that there are associated with it. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to give a short presentation around the Green Future Fund. Delighted if there are questions online, offline, whatever it might be.
Thank you very much, Charlie. It was a good, invigorating presentation of an interesting fund. I think you're right at it. It's a bit of a differentiator with other green funds, I think. And obviously, you have a good backup with a lot of resources, which of course is very good if you invest globally as you do. So I think it's an interesting fund and an interesting opportunity, of course.
Yeah.
Johan.
Yeah, and the fund will be available at alpha.se shortly. I think next week. So we're looking forward to that. And we will see if we can attach the link to the fund in the description later. Do you have any more questions, Jonas?
No, I think it's going to be interesting to follow. As I'm also a global fund manager, I'm going to look into a couple of those names. I do own Schneider Electric, for instance, and I've been considering Applied Materials, but haven't invested there. So it's always interesting to see inside the head of other managers. So thank you for that, Charlie.
Not at all. Delighted.
All right. Thank you very much, Jonas and Charlie.
Tackar.
Thank you.
Och tack alla som har lyssnat. Vi ses snart igen. Tack så mycket.